Hey guys, what's up? And welcome back to my channel. It's Josh. Happy 2020. This is the first video. I think this is going to be the first video of 2020, so I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season. It's so great to be back talking to you guys. We've got a pretty big video today. This is the head-to-head comparison between the Seiko SBDC051 and the Tissot Seastar 1000 Powermatic 80. So that's what we're going to be doing, and let's just kick things off. I'm going to put the specs on screen, so feel free to screen grab it here. But while I leave that up, I want to talk about kind of just the overall way that these two present in the hand, because there's no really good tangible way to describe that. They are pretty discernibly different in my opinion. There's a very different and a very clear divide between the way that the Asians do something and the way that the Europeans do something. They're clearly both great products, but I think that each kind of puts their resources and focuses their energy a little bit differently. So to me, Seiko beats everybody out at this price point with fit and finish, but Tissot's Powermatic 80 seems to be a little bit more highly regarded in the watch community and people on YouTube. The other thing that's kind of different with these two specifically is that the Tissot is a clean sheet redesign, where the Seiko is a reinterpretation of Seiko's original Prospex or original diver, which was the 62 Mas. Okay, so let's talk about price here, because this is where things are going to get a little bit more complicated. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to use each manufacturer's kind of recommended retail price. You see that as like RRP. Here in the US, we tend to call that manufacturer suggested retail price, or MSRP. You'll also hear it referred to as retail. So starting with the Tissot, it's easily the cheaper model here. We're looking at an MSRP or retail price of about $725 US. I bought mine from Bloomingdale's on sale for about $525, which is 25% off the retail price. And Bloomingdale's is an authorized dealer for Tissot. Now, the Seiko is a little bit more complicated because if you buy, there are two different versions that you can procure. So the first one is the SBDC051, which is what I have. And that is the JDM version. So it's not intended for sale here in the United States. To get the SBDC, you have to import one through like Seiya or Japan Online Store or something like that. There is a US version of it, which is called the SPB051J1, and it's exactly the same watch. Everything is the same, but that's the international model, which is intended for sale, outside of Japan and in the United States. And that one has a retail price of $1,000 US. So with that being said, both at retail and on sale, the Tissot is definitely the cheaper watch. So if you can get it for like 20 or 25% off, I think that's a real bargain, because again, then you're looking at like $500 some odd for the Tissot. And on top of that, again, you get 2 years of warranty with the Tissot versus 1 year of warranty with the US Seiko. So something to keep in mind there. Going back to the Seiko really quickly though, I do want to add that over the holidays, we were in San Francisco, and we went to the beautiful, the Macys on Union Square in downtown San Francisco. And they actually carried a number of the US market Seikos from the mid to upper range of the Presage line, of the Prospex line, that you don't normally see either at a Macys or at a department store or something like that. So if you do want the US market version with a US warranty and you want to pick it up in store, it looks like select Macys do carry that. So check that out if you're interested. Okay, so let's talk about the bracelets, because this is a big point of contention with, sub $1,000 watches. The Seiko, to me, feels like a much higher quality piece overall, and the execution of the bracelet specifically just really lends itself to feeling like a higher quality product. So because we are looking at a Seiko that's sort of like mid to upper range in their model line, we do have Zaratsu finishing and we have the Dia Shield coating on it, and those two kind of techniques combine to create just, again, a more refined, a much higher quality feel than what we find on the Tissot. You guys know that I'm not a huge fan of Tissot's bracelets in general. I kind of feel like, with Tissot, they all just they grab like a bracelet from the Tissot stockroom and put it on a watch, without really thinking about, what this watch is used for. And let me give you an example of that. So the bracelet that we find on the Tissot it's okay, it's fine, it's perfectly serviceable, but it doesn't feel like it was meant for a dive watch. And what I mean by that is, if we look at the clasp on it, you'll notice that, we do kind of have like a secured clasp with, the bar over top. But once you pull that off, and that can be kind of difficult to pry off, we don't have any kind of, push button action. We don't have any kind of, you kind of just have to like yank it off. And it kind of feels like when you're trying to pull that clasp open, it can kind of feel like you're almost about to break the clasp. The Seiko, on the other hand, has a beautiful clasp here. We've got it's secured over the top. We have a beautiful kind of push button action. And then when you open up that clasp, and it's quite easy to do with gloves or whatever else on, you actually find this beautiful machine clasp. And again, compared to the Tissot's stamp clasp, again, overall, just the whole kind of mechanics of the Seiko bracelet feel better than the Tissot's. Now, because these are both divers, I don't think that the stock bracelets here are a huge deal because, for example, my Tissot hardly ever... Actually, I don't think it's ever lived on its stock bracelet. I always wear it on a NATO strap because to me that's how a diver is most at home. Even my Omega, I always wear it on a NATO strap. So to me, the fact that the Tissot's bracelet is not really serviceable for everyday long periods, of wear is actually okay because, again, I think that this thing looks amazing on a classic kind of James Bond type NATO strap. Okay, so let's move on to the cases of these two watches, and I have to say I'm really torn here, which is kind of funny. I think with both, you have to make compromises. There's not really a clear winner here, and it really does come down to aesthetics. So the Tissot has a ceramic bezel, which is great, but the markings are kind of like overlaid or printed in this really kind of like mirror polished silver. And it's hard to tell in the product shots, like when you look at this online. It's hard to tell, but the markings are really, really difficult to read because, again, they're so reflective, and then the ceramic is so reflective as well. Now, that's not a bad thing because the markings are so bold on this watch that I don't think that they would look really good if they were always so visible. I personally prefer, in the overall scheme of things with this watch, that they kind of fade back. But again, that does make it quite hard to read at a quick glance. Now, the Seiko, on the other hand, has a stainless steel bezel, which is, again, a kind of a step down from ceramic. But the way that Seiko has treated these watches, the Seiko has kind of a lacquered coating on top of that stainless steel, so it does kind of take on the appearance of ceramic. It's a very kind of a glossy finish. And then what they did was they printed on top of that lacquered finish in kind of like this matte silver, they painted the markings and indices, which does make it a lot easier to read. Like, you can just glance down and quickly, get your bearings around the bezel. But at the same time, because it is a lacquered stainless steel and the markings are, again, printed on top of that lacquer, it probably is going to be a little bit less durable in the long run. And again, it's kind of, that's where I mean that there's a compromise here because, again, you can choose the nicer, more aesthetically pleasing bezel on the Seiko, or you can choose the ceramic bezel on the Tissot, which, again, to me is not as nice looking. So it's a toss-up there. With the dial, I'm torn here because I tend to lean more toward the dial of the Tissot, not because of the way that it's designed, but because of the way that it's finished. So the Seastar has kind of like this black dial. It looks black under kind of like most lights. And then when you take it out and you get a splash of light from like a bright overhead light or the sun or something like that, you get this beautiful kind of like anthracite gunmetal gray sunburst that's like really, really dazzling. And I think people have asked me in some of my previous videos if this is like the actual black model, because when you're under really brilliant lighting, the dial just comes alive. You get this beautiful kind of like gunmetal, kind of anthracite sunray color. It looks gray. It's just so beautiful when the light hits it, but it's not just dazzling all the time. Where the Seiko, on the other hand, just kind of has this matte black dial. I know that there are other Seikos out there, other kind of colorways of this model that have like a blue face and a green face, and they're beautiful. But I wish that Seiko did a little bit more to the basic black dial to kind of give it a little bit more pop or a little bit more depth or something. You guys know that one of my favorite things with the Omega Seamaster I have is that we have a lacquer dial, and so it just really gives a ton of depth when you look at the watch. And that's something that I personally feel like I'm missing with the Seiko. Now, I know that Seiko people are going to go, well, that's, it's from the Marine Master. It's the classic kind of, matte black Seiko dial is the classic Seiko diver. But I wish that Seiko had done a second black variant of this watch, again, with kind of like a lacquered finish or a sunburst finish or something that, the people who want the purest kind of like the classic matte black dial could buy that one, could buy, this one. And then people who wanted something with a little bit more character, a little bit more depth, could go and buy that second variant. Now, while we're talking about the dial, let's talk about Lume. And right here, again, there's no question that the Seiko's is better. Seiko divers are they're like famous for their excellent lume, and this is like no exception to that rule. The Swatch Group, though, it's funny, the Swatch Group can do some excellent lume. There are some great divers from like Longines and Omega that have amazing, like I think they call it Super Luminova. But for whatever reason, the Seastars from Tissot have just never gotten that treatment. And so you are definitely going to give up some lume with the Tissot over the Seiko. Now, with that being said, if like the lume and kind of like the overall night look, like the dark look of these watches is going to be a big selling point for you, I have to say that because of the way that the Tissot is designed with the kind of like, circles, squares, and triangular indices, it is easier to pick out what time it is looking at it in the dark than on the Seiko. The Seiko, if you notice, like all of the indices look exactly the same, so you could have the watch tilted at an angle and you could easily mistake the time on the Seiko than the Tissot, because you can clearly tell with the Tissot what's 12, 3, 6, and 9. But again, if the lume has already gone out on the Tissot, maybe that's not really helpful. I don't know. But overall, the lume is better on the Seiko. Let's talk about the movement. In my last Tissot versus Seiko video, if that's any indication, again, like I said, people seem to regard the Powermatic 80 as being kind of like a better movement or superior movement to the 6R15 that we find in the Seiko here. I personally don't think that one is superior to the other. I think that these are two just extremely solid mid-range movements. And they are, in my opinion, very comparable in most ways. The Powermatic 80 provides an 80-hour power reserve through a lower beat rate and a high-tech escapement, where the 6R15 gets a 50-hour power reserve through its Sprawn 510 mainspring. So either way, you are going to be a little bit above that 40-hour, the typical kind of 40-hour reserve. Personally, my choice here would be the 6R15. Those of you who have been with me here on my channel and watched the 8-month follow-up video for this particular watch will know that I've actually had two now, because the first example of this watch I had actually failed after about a month of me wearing it. And so I had to have it exchanged from Bloomingdale's, and they gave me a brand new one. I've also heard a lot of people saying that they have taken their 6Rs to a good jeweler and have had them regulated to near COSC chronometer spec. So again, because the 6R15 is a pretty, I don't want to say basic, but it's not a very high-tech, movement, the Tissot is regulated by laser at the factory. So it's kind of, that's kind of, it is what it is. And so with the P80, you get that, and that's what you're going to have for the rest of your life, for the rest of the life of the watch. Okay, and I am wrapping this up, I promise. The last thing I want to talk about is really just how these two work kind of like on a daily basis as your typical, diver watch that you're going to wear to the office, out to dinner, on date night, to the grocery store, running to the gym, whatever. That's really, what these watches have to do. They have to be great everyday tool watches. So starting with the Tissot, I think that this is a great, just kind of very practical, it's a good diver under $1,000. Some people were kind of turned off when the 2018 Seastar came out, because it did kind of lose a lot of its character if you compared it to like the last generation of the Seastar 1000 Powermatic 80. For me, I think that that's okay. I personally think that makes it a little bit more, it makes it more versatile. For somebody, again, who is maybe looking for just the diver to wear every day, in every kind of situation, the classic kind of bland or boring look is going to be a better fit than something with a lot of character. The Seastar is definitely more streamlined, and I think it can be worn, you know, with everything from a suit and tie to jeans and a t-shirt, on a NATO strap, on a rubber strap, whatever you want to do with it. So it's a really great choice for somebody who is either looking for it to be their one and only, or for somebody like me who might have more expensive divers. This is a great watch. The Seastar is a great watch for me to wear when I am going somewhere where there's a potential, a heightened risk for damage. I'm probably going to take my Seastar over my Seamaster because, again, if something happened to the Seastar, I wouldn't be as devastated because, again, I only paid like $550 for it. But in an everyday, real world kind of, you know, you're really going to be wearing this watch. You're really going to be wearing it as your, you know, your daily beater. Here's really where I have to say that the Seiko does make up for a lot of its shortcomings. Yes, you're getting only 200 meters of water resistance. Yes, you're getting a stainless steel bezel. Yeah, the face is a little bit not as, you know, fancy looking as the Tissot's, but the Seiko overall, the overall execution of the entire watch, the case, the dial, the bezel, the bracelet, the clasp, it just comes together to create a much more refined and finished piece. And I think that overall, again, because you can really, I could personally really wear this on its stock bracelet, I think that kind of pushes the Seiko, it gives it a really big advantage, in my opinion, to the Tissot, where I think that, again, even the most discerning watch owner, I think, could be happy with the Seiko's bracelet. The vintage styling, again, is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I personally really like it. I think that it looks really great. I think that it's got, again, because the Tissot has kind of gone toward this kind of like typical diver look, the Seiko has more character. It's got a bigger, louder, bolder personality than the Tissot does. And I think that that really, again, at this price point, is really going to give certain people a lot more for their money. Because some people are really looking for that. You know, they're looking for a watch under $1,000 that still has a lot of personality and a lot of unique charm to it. And that's something that you don't always find at this price point. The other thing that's kind of an unquantifiable kind of advantage, in my opinion, to the Seiko, for the Seiko, is that this is a JDM piece. And to really understand and appreciate the watch for what it is, you really have to be a watch enthusiast. So you can't just, you know, if you were, you know, in watch company, I think the Seiko is just, it's a much more, it says something about the owner who's wearing it. You know, you can't just pick it up at Macys or Bloomingdale's or whatever. You can't just, you know, go to a Swatch authorized retailer and pick it up. You have to know, one, you have to know what it is. Two, you have to know where to get it. And three, to appreciate it, you really have to be a watch enthusiast. And so, to me, again, that kind of just elevates the way that I feel about that Seiko and a lot of my JDM watches in general. Like, I feel like I've purchased something a little bit more special than, again, the Tissot that anybody can go out and buy. And when you combine that with the fact that this is still a solid, really amazing diver under $1,000, to me, that's kind of where it pushes the Seiko over the edge. Some people are going to disagree with that, and there are people, of course, who will never ever buy anything that wasn't made in Switzerland. But the other thing about either of these watches, whichever you pick, you're going to get a great watch. But I think that this would also be a great piece for somebody who is maybe a Swiss snob that's never experienced Seiko craftsmanship or quality. This would be a great kind of first piece for you to, you know, not spend a lot of money on, just, you know, spend the $700, pick this guy up, and really see what the Seiko hype is about. These are both amazing watches. I think that whichever you choose to buy, you're going to be very happy with. I hope you will be anyway. And I just don't think that you can regret your purchase either way with one of these watches, because either way you're going to get something great. So that's about it. Thanks for watching another video, guys. I apologize that this was so long, and I tried to stay on script and it still went long. Questions, comments, leave them down below or message me on Instagram. I always reply as quickly and as thoroughly as I can to all of your questions and comments. Thank you guys so much for watching another video. Happy 2020. I'm already rambling, so I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.